Hey guys, what is up and welcome to another League of Legends video. In this one I will be talking about another top segment of my favorite champions for a specific role, and in this episode we will cover the role of AD carry. Now as you know, AD carries are a bit more limited in the champion pool as opposed to other lanes such as middle, which is why I will only talk about my favorite top 5 ADC champions, and I hope you guys will enjoy this. Before I begin listing the top 5, I want to mention that this is my own personal preference, so keep this in mind. On top of that, this is specifically for solo queue. This is not for team play or a competitive play. This is just primarily for solo queue. Now, what do I look for in an ADC that I personally like, or that I personally believe is one of the best ones? So, as I also mentioned in my top 10 middle champion episode, I said that I really enjoy mobility, and this applies here as well, especially for ADC, because ADC's positioning in a team fight is extremely important, and I feel like positioning them and having an ability that helps you position even better, or even kite or even chase, is extremely important. So that's what I really like, and that's the main thing I usually look for when I'm pretty much planning out whether or not I like a certain ADC and how much I really want to invest my time and get better with a certain ADC. So without much more further ado, let us jump into the top 5 ADC champions from my own personal preference for solo queue. So the first champion is pretty much the champion you've been watching for the past minute as I was doing my little introduction, and that is the Draven. Draven is an awesome ADC because he has mobility with his W, which lets him kind of, juke around quite a bit and have him a lot of movement speed to be able to either chase people or run away from people. He has his E, which will slow people as well, so, combine that with his W, it gives him really good mobility and really good chance to position himself in team fights. On top of that, he has crazy burst damage, which I really like. I mean, I personally enjoy ADCs that just have a lot of burst damage just because it pretty much fits my playstyle in the middle lane, which is assassins, and I just feel like Draven covers those roles pretty well. On top of that, he's extremely dominant in the lane in the early phase, so that really helps you kind of just snowball out of the laning phase a bit harder as well. And I just really like playing him because catching those axes is just extremely fun. Now, he is a bit more difficult to play than most other ADCs in my opinion, just because you have to always position yourself to catch the axe, but I do feel like he's definitely deserving of the top 5 ADC list. Now, the second champion I will cover is my second probably most favorite champion, Vayne. Now keep in mind, I just want to mention that this list is not in any specific order. Now, Vayne is a really solid ADC, and you see her banned quite frequently as of, this time in the solo queue or even draft mode picks for normal games, because she's just extremely strong. Her laning phase isn't usually as weak as it should be when you take into consideration just how strong she can scale into late game. Now, the reason she's really good is because her W just does immense damage, and once you get attack speed, so like a Berserker Greaves, Blade of the Ruin King, a Zephyr and or Phantom Dancer, or even a Static Shift, she'll just get that W proccing so fast, and it deals true damage and percent damage of your HP, which is crazy good, and it's really hard to counter that because you can't counter it with armor, and you can't necessarily counter it with HP since it's percentage of your max HP. So, I mean, Vayne, super strong champion, and on top of that, she has an amazing ultimate, which gives her great mobility if you combine it with the Q, and she has a really good stun, which can be a little tricky to land at times. However, if you can perfect the role and the art of playing this champion, she's extremely good because she brings a lot of damage, huge mobility, crazy outplay potential just because of that ulti Q juking capabilities, and on top of that, I mean, she's just an overall solid ADC that's a really good pickup for almost any lineup. However, be cautious when playing her because her weak part is her laning phase, and you really have to try and get past it, because if you face someone like a Caitlyn, it will be quite difficult, and you can definitely just get absolutely shut down, and it'll be very difficult for you to even come back into the game. The next champion I want to cover is Ezreal. Now, this is a champion I actually kind of looked down upon for quite some time, just because I never really considered him to be that good until I recently picked him up once again, and I really noticed that, with the blue build, or with the new Trinity Force, if you haven't really seen it, I mean, the new Trinity Force that gives 200% extra damage is just insanely good on him now, so I really recommend picking that up if you do play Ezreal. But I mean, I just started playing blue build Ezreal, and I really just began to see his potential. I really began to see just why, someone like QtPie just brought him out and just was dominating with it, or someone like Doublelift just constantly dominates, even though his build is slightly different. But I just saw the potential because great range with his Q, crazy poke, and his E, really great when it comes to kiting or chasing. And since your Q reduces the cooldown on your other spells whenever you do land it, even on a minion, not necessarily a champion, your E is a lot lower cooldown than it may seem initially, because initially it's like, oh, 20 seconds, but throw in a few Qs and it's suddenly 10 seconds. So not a bad champion whatsoever, because once again, like I said, great damage, great range, especially his ulti is amazingly good, I think personally, great at picking people off, and great just maybe clearing the wave and scouting, even maybe checking Baron, and he has just really good kite potential with his E, and I just honestly think he's a pretty good champion overall. Next is the badass man himself, Graves. Graves is another solid ADC champion, and there's one main reason that I personally think he's good, and this is just because of his E. I had one game where I was playing Graves on my main account, I believe, and I was just getting kind of outplayed in the lane against the Caitlyn. You know, I wasn't able to really do much against her, and I'm like, oh man, this Caitlyn is just, she's just destroying me. I'm like, what am I gonna do? So that was a pretty bad play in the video there. But anyway, and I'm like, what am I going to do, right? And then they had a lot of tanks. They had a Jarvan and a Shen that just kept jumping on me. I'm like, how am I going to win this? You know, how am I going to melt through these tanks that just keep jumping on me? Until eventually, I got my core items, you know, like a Last Whisper, an IE, a PD. And then with my E, which just gives me, you know, good juking capabilities or mobility or kiting. On top of that, it gives me that crazy attack speed, which every time you attack lowers its cooldown. So, I mean, at a certain point, it'll almost have no cooldown, or maybe worst case scenario, 3 or 4 seconds of a cooldown, which is really good considering it gives you a huge jolt of attack speed, which I think is just absolutely important on ADCs. But I just started melting through these tanks. I'm like, you know, wow, like I was just shredding through a Shen. I was shredding through a tank Jarvan like butter. It was just not a problem whatsoever. And after this game, I'm like, you know what? Graves is actually a pretty good champion. I mean, for some reason, sometimes I find his laning phase a little difficult, and I do kind of feel like he's a do-or-die champion sometimes. Not always, but I feel like he may be a little difficult to come back if you're just completely behind. But if you are at least mediocrely even or ahead, you'll just move into the late game extremely strong, and mainly because of his E. Just that attack speed he offers is so good, on top of the mobility he offers as well. And on top of that, you have his W, which is the smoke screen, which is just huge. It's game changing, and I don't know, man, in a team fight, if you just use it on the proper, like maybe ADC or middle, it'll honestly take them about a second or two just to get out of it, and that's a whole second or two late game, which is a lot of them not doing anything against your team, which is also really important. So Graves, another champion I recommend picking up if you're playing ADC. And then coming in at the 5th spot is going to be Twitch. Now the reason I like Twitch is, even though he has no specific mobility such as maybe an Ezreal or Graves, he still has his Q, which not only gives him great capabilities of juking people out and just pretty much getting out of harm's way. You know, maybe when someone dives on you, just pop that Q, and if they have no oracles, in about a couple of seconds, you will go invisible and you can just reposition yourself. But the Q also gives you movement speed, and I believe attack speed as well once you get out of the Q, right? Which is really, really good. And on top of that, his ulti gives him huge range, and then just melts through the whole team. And the fact that it gives you such long range is pretty much, you know, an incorporation of being able to kite people, because you're so far away that it'll be really hard for them to even get to you. And if they ever get to you, you pop that Q, and it's, you know, really, really nice to have. On top of that, like I said with Draven, I like champions that have good burst damage or outplay potential, and I feel like he has that because his W, really nice slow that adds his passive, which is just amazingly good. I mean, it's true damage, I believe. It's just huge. And his expunge, crazy damage as well. If you just ulti to the whole team and then they're all poisoned and then you just expunge the whole team, you know, it's going to hurt a lot. On top of your passive just ticking on all of them. So Twitch is also extremely strong, and I honestly think he's probably one of the strongest ADCs if played correctly, just because his trade potential in the lane is huge ever since Draven got nerfed, and it's potentially one of the strongest laners in the game, I believe, as an ADC. So, you know, if you're wondering maybe who to pick up, maybe someone that can just absolutely dominate the lane with, Twitch might be that champion that you should pick up and try out and see if you can maybe dominate the games with, because honestly, he's a very solid champion. Before I end off the video, there's actually 2 champions I want to kind of give a special mention about, and I was really tempted to include them, but they didn't really fit exactly what I'm looking for in a top 5 ADC list, because they don't really have something that I want. And the second champion, I'll explain why I didn't include him as well. But the first one is, like, as you can see, Varus. Varus is a super good champion who also has a lot of just upfront burst damage. But the main reason I wanted to include Varus as kind of, you know, don't forget kind of mention, even though he's not in the top 5 necessarily, is just because of his Q. I love his Q. I think his Q is just an awesome spell. It's huge poke damage, and it's just immensely good to use. So that's one of the main reasons I even play Varus, is just to fire that Q. I just have so much satisfaction of sniping people down with it, especially when you get 3 stacks at the W, pull that E, and then just Q on top of them, and you know, they're gonna take some heavy damage. And I just want to give a small special shout out to Varus. And then we have the last champion I want to mention, the new one, Lucian. I mean, oh my god, this guy is beast. The reason I didn't include him, even though I was really tempted to in the top 5, is because he's still a very new champion. I don't really want to include a new champion in the list just yet, because, you know, who knows what might happen to him, and I think it's just a little too early to say. But I really wanted to throw him in this video just because I'm really liking him lately. I've been playing him more and more as he got released, and I just feel like he has just a really good kit. I mean, his ulti, you know, even though I had problems with it, I really started to get used to it a bit more. And you know what? It's not a bad ultimate whatsoever, because his ultimate is just perfect when it comes to kiting people or even chasing. Because you ulti and you pop that E and you're just running around backwards, forwards, just pretty much hitting them from such a far range that they can't even get to you, but you're just constantly barraging them with just bolts of damage. His E, like I said, extremely good. It's really fast and it removes slow, so like a Nasus Wither, which is just, you know, the bane of all ADCs, it just remove it. I mean, how awesome is that? His W, really nice with the mark, as it gives you another, you know, potential of kiting / chasing. And I just want to give a nice little mention to this boy as well. So that's it for my top 10, or rather top 5 video of ADCs. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please tell me what you think, and keep in mind, this is my thoughts about this only. I mean, it's my personal preference, so don't take this, you know, completely, you know, I don't know, seriously, or just take it with a grain of salt is all I want to say. And, you know, if you're thinking of maybe picking up ADC to try and carry your games, this is something you might want to do. So hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Peace.